Dallas, Texas, America's megachurch capital. Within an 18-month period, 5 of the city's most prominent pastors resigned from ministry under troubling circumstances. This investigation is based on public reporting, documented statements, and expert analysis, not speculation. June 2024, Robert Morris, founding pastor of Gateway Church with 25,000 members, resigned after decades-old allegations surfaced regarding inappropriate conduct with a minor. The same month, Tony Evans, pastor of Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship with 10,000 members, stepped down citing unspecified past moral failures. Others soon followed. High-profile leaders, churches with tens of thousands of members, resignations announced with vague statements about needing to step back or past mistakes. And these were just the public cases. Multiple other Dallas area pastors quietly resigned with minimal explanation, leaving congregations confused and wounded. What's happening in Dallas? Why are so many prominent pastors falling simultaneously? Is this coincidence or evidence of something deeper? The Dallas megachurch crisis isn't random. Investigations and reports suggest it's the predictable result of a ministry ecosystem with structural vulnerabilities. An ecosystem built on celebrity leadership with limited independent oversight, financial operations with minimal public transparency, cultures where, according to former members and staff, questioning leaders could be discouraged or punished. Today, we're investigating why Dallas became ground zero for a wave of pastoral crises, what these churches had in common structurally that created conditions where moral failures could remain hidden, and what the Dallas situation reveals about challenges facing megachurch Christianity in America. Because according to ministry analysts and former megachurch staff, this isn't just a Dallas problem. It's a structural issue that could affect large churches in any city where celebrity pastors operate with limited accountability. This is bigger than anyone realizes, because the Dallas megachurch crisis, according to experts who study church governance, represents a warning. The systems American Christianity built to grow churches may contain the same vulnerabilities that enable leaders to fail. And until those systems change, the crises will likely continue. Dallas, Texas has been described as America's megachurch capital. More large churches, over 2,000 weekly attendees, exist in the Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex than any other U.S. city, according to church growth researchers. Gateway Church, the Potter's House, Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship, the Village Church, First Baptist Dallas. These aren't just churches, they're organizations with budgets in the tens of millions, pastors with national media platforms, and influence that shapes American evangelicalism. But in 2023 to 2024, Dallas's megachurch landscape began experiencing what observers called a crisis of leadership. Multiple pastors resigned. Churches faced serious challenges. Congregants who trusted their leaders discovered, according to investigative reports, that significant issues had been concealed. According to national surveys, trust in megachurch leadership has declined sharply over the last decade, and the Dallas crisis accelerated that trend dramatically. The Dallas megachurch crisis wasn't just about individual failings. Reports and analyses suggest it revealed systemic vulnerabilities in how these organizations operate. Today, we're investigating the Dallas megachurch situation. Why so many prominent pastors experienced crises within months of each other. What structural commonalities these churches shared that experts say made leadership failures more likely. And what this cluster of events reveals about challenges in megachurch governance that could affect churches nationwide. Because understanding Dallas means understanding broader patterns in American Christianity, and why some ministry experts argue the megachurch model may have fundamental structural problems. To understand the Dallas megachurch crisis, you need to know how Dallas became America's megachurch capital and what organizational culture developed. Dallas's megachurch boom began in the 1970s, 80s during the Sunbelt migration when millions moved to Texas for economic opportunity. Churches that could attract these newcomers by offering contemporary worship, dynamic preaching, and professional programs grew rapidly. T.D. Jakes established the Potter's House in Dallas in 1996, which grew to 30,000 members through charismatic preaching according to church reports. Gateway Church was founded in 2000 and grew to over 25,000 through contemporary worship and practical Bible teaching. Tony Evans built Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship through expositional preaching and community focus. These pastors became prominent figures in Dallas Christianity, influential leaders whose reach extended far beyond their local congregations. They spoke at national conferences, published best-selling books, appeared regularly in Christian media. According to church governance experts who've studied megachurch structures, this prominence created what they describe as celebrity pastor culture, where individual leaders become the primary brand and face of their organizations. Boards in many cases were composed of admirers rather than independent overseers, these analysts note. Staff members, former employees report, sometimes felt they couldn't raise concerns without risking their positions. Congregations, according to surveys of megachurch attendees, often viewed criticism of senior leadership as inappropriate or spiritually problematic. Ministry researchers argue these dynamics created what they call accountability gaps, situations where leaders operated with significant authority but limited independent oversight. Financial operations at most of these churches, public records show, were not disclosed in detail to congregations or the public. By 2020, Dallas megachurches appeared successful by conventional metrics: attendance, financial giving, cultural influence. But beneath the surface, according to subsequent investigations and reports, serious issues were developing in multiple organizations. The COVID pandemic and increased media scrutiny created conditions where, as victims' advocates note, those who'd been harmed felt more empowered to speak publicly, and the Dallas megachurch establishment that had seemed stable began experiencing the crisis that would unfold in 2023 to 2024. The Dallas megachurch crisis became public in 2023 to 2024 through a series of leadership resignations that, according to reporting, shocked the Christian community. In June 2024, investigative reports revealed decades-old allegations involving Gateway Church founder Robert Morris and inappropriate conduct with a minor. Morris issued a statement acknowledging what he described as inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady from the 1980s. Critics noted the language appeared to minimize the seriousness of the allegations, which involved, according to the victim's public account, abuse that occurred when she was 12 years old. Morris resigned, and Gateway Church, according to attendance reports, experienced significant membership decline. The same month, Tony Evans announced his resignation from Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship, citing in a public statement, "Sin I committed years ago," without providing specific details. According to church members who spoke to media, the lack of transparency left the congregation confused and hurt. Questions about the nature, timing, and context of the acknowledged wrongdoing remained unanswered. Earlier, Matt Chandler had stepped back from regular preaching at the Village Church after acknowledging, according to his public statement, an inappropriate relationship conducted through electronic communication with a woman who wasn't his wife. T.D. Jakes faced public scrutiny in late 2023 when legal documents connected his name to controversial allegations, claims Jakes denied, but which, according to media analysis, affected his public reputation. According to observers of Dallas Christianity, these weren't isolated incidents. They revealed concerning patterns. Leaders whose public teaching emphasized one set of values while investigations later revealed private conduct raised serious questions. Churches with governance structures that, critics argued, enabled rather than prevented problems. And most concerning to victims' advocates, organizational cultures where those who tried to raise concerns reportedly faced pressure to remain silent. The impact on Dallas's Christian community, according to pastors and counselors working with affected individuals, has been significant. Churches lost thousands of members according to attendance tracking. People who dedicated years to these ministries told reporters they felt betrayed and spiritually wounded. Young Christians, surveys suggest, are increasingly skeptical of large church institutions, with some leaving evangelical Christianity entirely. The Dallas crisis, according to church governance experts, forced uncomfortable questions. Are megachurch structures capable of providing adequate accountability for senior leaders? Does the celebrity pastor model create conditions where moral failures become more likely? Can churches operating with corporate-style governance centered on a single prominent leader maintain spiritual integrity long-term? Evidence from Dallas, these analysts suggest, raises serious concerns about all three questions. To understand why so many Dallas megachurch pastors experienced crises simultaneously, church governance researchers point to common structural factors they argue made leadership failures more likely. The governance structures at these megachurches, according to organizational charts and bylaws examined by analysts, concentrated significant authority in senior pastors. Elder boards at several churches were selected by or served at the discretion of senior pastors, creating what governance experts call structural conflicts of interest, situations where those responsible for oversight depend on the leader they're supposed to monitor. According to former board members who've spoken to researchers, financial decisions, hiring, strategic vision, and theological direction were often controlled by senior pastors, with boards primarily affirming rather than critically evaluating. Ministry analysts argue this structure meant pastors functionally answered to no one with real power to intervene if problems emerged. The prominence of Dallas megachurch pastors, according to media researchers who study religious celebrity, made them difficult to challenge even when concerning signs appeared. These men were Christian celebrities, best-selling authors, conference speakers, media personalities whose reputations brought both financial resources and cultural influence to their organizations. According to former staff members who've been interviewed, employees and board members who benefited from the pastor's fame had incentives to overlook problems rather than risk damaging the institutional brand. The financial structures, according to nonprofit accountability organizations, reinforced these dynamics. Dallas megachurches operate with annual budgets ranging from tens to over $100 million according to partial disclosures. None of the Dallas megachurches that experience crises publish detailed public financial statements showing pastoral compensation, detailed spending priorities, or comprehensive asset information. When organizations become large financial operations, critics argue, protecting revenue can overshadow protecting people, with allegations sometimes addressed through legal settlements rather than transparent investigation. The theological culture at several churches, according to analysis of sermons and teaching materials, emphasized pastoral authority in ways that, critics contend, discouraged accountability. Teaching about respecting God's anointed created cultures where, former members report, criticism of leadership could be characterized as spiritual rebellion. The lack of denominational oversight, church polity experts note, meant problems could develop without external intervention. Most Dallas megachurches experiencing crises were either independent or loosely affiliated with denominations, meaning no outside body had clear authority to investigate allegations or discipline leaders. According to organizational analysts who study these patterns, the commonalities across Dallas megachurch crises are striking. Prominent pastor, limited independent oversight, celebrity dynamics, financial opacity, theological emphasis on pastoral authority, and independent governance structure. These factors, they argue, didn't cause individuals to fail morally, but they created environments where serious problems could remain hidden for extended periods. Sarah attended Gateway Church for 12 years, serving in children's ministry and giving financially. Robert Morris's teaching, she told me, significantly shaped her spiritual understanding. When news of the allegations broke in June 2024, Sarah described experiencing a profound crisis of faith. I had trusted him completely. He taught about God, relationships, parenting, foundational things. Learning about the allegations and the decades they'd reportedly been hidden was devastating. Sarah described Gateway's culture as highly pastor-focused. We referred to him affectionately. The church's identity felt completely connected to him. When the crisis happened, it shook everything. Sarah left Gateway and told me she hasn't regularly attended church since. I'm struggling with whether I can trust pastoral leadership again. If someone who appeared so credible was allegedly involved in something so serious that was hidden for so long, how do you trust anyone? Sarah's experience, according to counselors working with those affected by church crises, represents a common pattern: deep spiritual wounds not from weak faith, but from discovering that institutions and leaders they trusted had serious undisclosed problems. Michael worked on staff at the Village Church for 6 years during Matt Chandler's leadership. He told me he valued the church and respected Chandler's teaching. When Chandler stepped back in 2024 over what was described as an inappropriate relationship, Michael felt profoundly disappointed. There had been consistent teaching about boundaries, marriage fidelity, and personal integrity. Learning about behavior that appeared inconsistent with that teaching was disillusioning. Michael described what he observed as an organizational culture with strong identification with the senior leader. The church's identity and the pastor's identity felt deeply intertwined. The leadership structure, in my observation, didn't seem designed for robust independent accountability. Michael left the village church after the situation. I realized the organization's stability seemed too dependent on one person. When problems emerged with that person, there wasn't sufficient institutional structure to provide stability. Michael now attends a smaller church with shared leadership among multiple elders. I personally prefer church structures where authority is distributed and accountability is built into the system rather than dependent on voluntary transparency. Linda attended Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship for 25 years. Tony Evans's biblical teaching, she told me, was foundational to her theological development. When Evans resigned with what she described as a vague statement citing unspecified past wrongdoing, Linda felt confused more than anything. The resignation acknowledged something serious enough to step down from ministry, but didn't provide information about what specifically happened, when, or the circumstances. That lack of clarity made it difficult to process. Linda described feeling the congregation was treated as though detailed information would be inappropriate. We're adults who have supported this ministry for years. Many of us felt we deserved more transparency, especially if restoration and forgiveness were being discussed. Linda remains at Oak Cliff but told me she's wrestling with difficult questions. I'm trying to figure out how to evaluate teaching from someone whose private life apparently contained serious issues that weren't disclosed while they were teaching. It's complicated. David pastors a church of about 200 members in Dallas. He told me he spent much of 2024 helping people affected by megachurch crises who've joined his congregation. We've welcomed several dozen individuals from the larger churches that experienced leadership crises. They're processing trauma, anger, and fundamental questions about church and leadership. David described common themes in their stories. Many described feeling their trust was violated. They were encouraged toward unquestioning loyalty to leaders who turned out to have serious undisclosed issues. They're frustrated about financial operations they supported but never saw detailed information about. And they're grieving. They lost communities they deeply valued. David sees the Dallas situation as revealing systemic issues in how many large churches operate. When organizations are built around celebrity leaders with limited structural accountability, problems become more likely. I wish I could say this won't happen again, but the organizational structures that create these conditions remain common. The moment that transformed the Dallas megachurch situation from isolated incidents to a recognized crisis, according to media analysts, was June 2024 when both Robert Morris and Tony Evans resigned within days of each other. Morris's resignation followed investigative reporting published June 18 detailing decades-old allegations. Within 72 hours, Tony Evans announced his departure June 21 with his brief statement about unspecified past wrongdoing. Two of Dallas's most prominent pastors, leading churches with approximately 35,000 combined members, experiencing crises within days created what media researchers describe as a critical mass effect. News coverage intensified, framing the situation as evidence of systemic issues rather than individual problems. Christians nationally, according to social media analysis and commentary, began questioning whether megachurch Christianity had fundamental structural vulnerabilities. And individuals who'd experienced harm in church contexts, Victims Advocates report, felt more empowered to share their own stories, sensing the cultural moment had shifted toward greater openness to their accounts. The timing, two major crises within 72 hours, made what some call structural denial more difficult and forced broader conversations about megachurch governance, celebrity culture, and accountability mechanisms that had often been avoided. The Dallas megachurch crisis, according to ministry analysts and church governance experts, suggest patterns that could affect American Christianity's future. First, additional megachurch leadership crises are likely, these experts argue, because the structural vulnerabilities identified in Dallas exist in large churches nationwide. Celebrity-focused leadership with limited independent oversight, minimal financial transparency, and organizational cultures emphasizing loyalty aren't unique to Dallas. Church governance researchers describe them as common characteristics of many megachurch operations. Second, trust in pastoral leadership, surveys suggest, continues declining, particularly among younger Christians who've observed repeated high-profile failures. According to research on religious confidence, Americans' trust in religious institutions has dropped to historic lows, and the Dallas crises accelerated that decline. Third, the megachurch model itself, some ministry analysts predict, will face increasing scrutiny as Christians recognize that size, prominence, and numerical growth don't necessarily correlate with spiritual health. They suggest healthy Christianity's future may look more like smaller, accountable communities with distributed leadership. Fourth, legal and regulatory accountability for churches, according to policy analysts, may increase as legislators recognize current exemptions can enable organizational dysfunction. Finally, individuals harmed in church contexts, advocates report, are increasingly organizing and using legal systems and media platforms to demand accountability when internal processes fail. The Dallas megachurch crisis invites Christians to consider difficult questions. Could the systems we built to grow churches contain the seeds of their own dysfunction? According to church governance experts and organizational analysts, patterns in Dallas suggest that when churches concentrate power in celebrity leaders, limit independent oversight, and prioritize growth metrics over character development and accountability, they create conditions where serious problems become more likely. Not because pastors are uniquely flawed, but because, as organizational research suggests, structures removing safeguards produce predictable results. The path forward, according to those who study healthy church governance, requires changes American Christianity often resists. Reducing celebrity-focused ministry even when dynamic leaders attract crowds. Implementing meaningful accountability even when it limits what prominent pastors can accomplish independently. Publishing financial transparency even when it reveals uncomfortable information about resource allocation. Valuing character development over charisma, long-term faithfulness over rapid growth, and people's well-being over institutional platforms. This likely means, analysts suggest, smaller organizations, less impressive productions, and fewer best-selling pastor authors. But it could also mean, they argue, fewer institutional crises, greater integrity, and witness that aligns more closely with stated values. The Dallas megachurch crisis, according to ministry observers, presents American Christianity with a choice. Churches can continue building organizations around celebrity pastors, accepting that additional crises are probable. Or they can, as some governance experts recommend, return to biblical patterns, distributed leadership, mutual accountability, transparency, and service-oriented, rather than authoritative approaches to pastoral ministry. The choice, these analysts suggest, will shape whether future generations inherit Christianity of substance or, as some fear, the institutional wreckage of another organizational model built on unstable foundations. Multiple Dallas megachurch pastors experienced serious crises, according to documented reports and investigations, because structural vulnerabilities made such outcomes more likely. The question isn't, some ministry analysts argue, whether additional situations will occur. It's whether American Christianity will address root causes or simply wait for the next crisis. Dallas demonstrated, according to those who study church health and governance, that megachurch Christianity as currently practiced by many organizations faces sustainability challenges. The remaining question, they suggest, is whether concern for the church's integrity and mission will motivate sufficient structural change, or whether familiar patterns will simply repeat in other cities with similar results. If Dallas is a warning, will churches listen or repeat the same mistakes?